So what happened with us is that we had a bunch of English Catholics that came from Maryland particular. It came through Maryland, came through the Cumberland Gap, particularly up Wilderness Road into central Kentucky. Whole bunch of them. Others came down the Ohio on flatboats and blazed a trail into the Bardstown area. But both those passageways produced a whole bunch of Catholics here in the very, very late 1700s, very, very early 1800s. So you had one diocese in 1790, Baltimore, that covered the entire United States all the way to the Mississippi River. Okay, that was it. And the Catholics in Kentucky kept begging the bishop to come over and do confirmation. Because back then, before St. Pius X, in the early 1900s, you had to be confirmed before you got First Communion. So if you had no confirmation, how did you get communion? And so they desperately wanted the bishop to come visit him. Bishop Carroll could take a ship to Europe, do a preaching tour to raise money, recruit seminarians to be priests, buy all of his equipment, and get back to Baltimore easier than he could get across the Appalachians to do his due diligence in Kentucky. So he begged Rome to make the Kentucky area, everything west of the Appalachians essentially, a separate diocese, which made sense. You'd have a bishop for the west part, you have a bishop for these. They didn't have to cross the mountains. They could take the rivers pretty easily because the rivers didn't go across the mountains. They don't go up, they only go down for some strange reason. But nevertheless.
Pesky gravity.
Yeah, gravity would do that. But nevertheless, so Bishop Carroll kept begging Rome to make the Kentucky area, Bardstown was kind of one of the bigger towns at that point, a separate diocese. And so Rome finally did. Rome doesn't act quickly. And there were some good reasons. Napoleon was coming through. He had imprisoned the Pope, and all kinds of other things. So it was very, very difficult for Rome to do much of anything. So once Rome did, they not only made Bardstown a diocese, but they had a bunch of bishops that were extra in Rome. Why? Napoleon had come through and taken over a bunch of dioceses that had land with them because Napoleon wanted the land, particularly in Belgium, in Germany, in Switzerland, and places like that. So he had Italy. So he had taken over the diocese. And what do you do if an incoming emperor takes your whole place? You go back to your boss in Rome. So they had a surfeit of bishops. They wanted to dump some in the New World. So they did. So they made New York and Philadelphia and Boston dioceses as well as Bardstown. The first two bishops of New York never made it to New York. One was appointed in Rome, consecrated, or was already a bishop, and was assigned to New York. They had a British blockade, never made it to New York. He died in Rome. Second one, same thing. Died in Rome. The third bishop of New York actually set foot in New York and things like that. We were lucky. We had Benedict Joseph Laget, who was consecrated in another location and then was able to be over here. And I think Kenrick was the first one for Philadelphia, and so they would do that. Carroll didn't want to lose Philadelphia. He'd make that there in a carriage ride. He didn't want to have it a separate diocese. But you don't argue with Rome, So,
but like what you were saying is what you're saying is that Boston, New York, Philadelphia have dioceses because
we were the ones that Carroll asked for one. Otherwise, he would kept quiet about it. Now, around that same time, then we purchased Louisiana, and there was a diocese made in New Orleans, but it was a suffragan diocese of Cuba. Because Louisiana was Spanish for 40 years. Yeah. And then Napoleon took it back, and then a couple years later he needed money, didn't have the troops to defend Louisiana, so hey, I get money or I lose troops. I'll take the money, So he sold all of Louisiana, and that became the responsibility of Bishop Laget because there was no bishop there. It was a diocese, but they didn't have a bishop.
And
in New Orleans.
The audience, just as a reminder, right, we don't just mean like the little state of Louisiana now. We're talking about the whole
Louisiana
Territory.
All the way out to Montana.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, there weren't many people that far out there, but there was St. Louis, there was Kaskaskia, Cahokia, Vincennes, Terre Haute, several French settlements, Sault Ste. Marie up in Canada, which the British never let go of, and even though they were supposed to earlier, and a number of other places, including Bishop Flagey wrote back to Rome about this new upstart village that was on the shores of Lake Michigan called Chicago. But he didn't think it would amount to much. So that was in 1836 because they tried to found it in 1810, 1811, and they got wiped out completely, the Fort Dearborn Massacre. So, but anyway, that's some of the original stories. We had a bunch of English Catholics that came, and surprisingly, they were, well, not too surprisingly, they and all the other non-Catholics got along very, very well in Kentucky. The reason is that